Coming up, I'll give you the inside scoop on my media tour to promote Vindicating Trump. Lara Trump, Trump's daughter-in-law and co-chair of the RNC, joins me. We're going to talk about Trump the man and also what the RNC is doing to protect election integrity. And I'll preview the upcoming debate between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
I am in the throes of the media tour for both the movie Vindicating Trump and the accompanying book. And it just occurred to me this morning that the book is, well, it's just a week away. October 8th is the official publication date for the book. So if you've been kind of holding off on ordering it, now's the time to do it. You'll get it right away as soon as the book is officially out. They will get it out to you. You can go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or just go to the movie website, vindicatingtrump.com. The movie, by the way, is still in 800 plus theaters. It will unfortunately shrink down to about 400 and some theaters this coming weekend. This is actually a little bit of a natural process. You do well in some theaters, not so well in others, and you lose some theaters. So that is the nature of the beast. But you'll still have a chance to see the film this week, and it'll still be in theaters, or at least some theaters, next weekend. By the way, the Rotten Tomatoes scores are in. The film is scoring, well, the tomato meter, as they call it, moves a little bit, but it's well over 90%. It's sometimes 93, 94, 97, 98, and reviews pour in. But basically, people they love the film, and they love the film because it gives you a fresh window on Trump. This is not the usual kind of boilerplate. If you've seen a Trump rally, I don't need to see the film. Not at all. The film is, well, let me put it slightly differently. Trump doesn't quite make the case for himself in the way that, say, Reagan did. Reagan would step up and give you multiple reasons to vote for him. He'd make the case for Reagan. Trump does his thing. He does a shtick. He shows himself to you, but there is a case to be made for Trump, and that's what the film does. That's what the book does. Now, these tours have varied over the years. There was a time when you'd promote a film by traveling nonstop. Fortunately, these days, I can do a lot of stuff, right at home on my computer, using technology, using Skype and using Zoom, and I can cover the gamut that way. So I did Bongino's show, for example, that way on the radio. And then yesterday I did Mark Levin's show. And but some of it does involve travel. And so Debbie and I kind of did a little jaunt together. We hit Oklahoma City, then we went on to Miami for a day of publicity there. I did the Dave Rubin podcast, and then and a bunch of other stuff. In fact, I went by the local studio in Miami and did a couple of podcasts out of that very cool local studio in Miami. And then I'm also heading now to Dallas, because Dallas is the home of Mr. Glenn Beck. And Glenn Beck, I'm going to do an interview with Glenn Beck on his show, but there are also a bunch of other shows all connected with Glenn Beck's organization called The Blaze. And so it's going to be Blaze Studio Day for me. By the way, I'm also going to be doing a Twitter Spaces with Josie, the redheaded libertarian. So if you look up Josie, she'll be promoting the spaces. And if you'd like to hear me on Twitter and participate in the X Spaces, you can do that. Some people ask me the question, how do we get independents to watch this movie? And their premise is that the movie is likely to be seen mainly by Republicans and conservatives. And ironically, that is the way to get independents to see it. In other words, the more conservatives and Republicans see it, the more the movie causes a stir or a buzz, this draws out attacks from the left, and then independents and moderates are like, well, I hear there's a lot of fuss that's being raised over this film. I better go see it, or I better check it out. And even if they check it out later, they don't go to the theater maybe, but they check it out in subsequent manifestations of the movie through streaming or through DVDs. Nevertheless, they see the movie. Why? Because they've heard about it. And the way for them to hear about it is for you to see it. And for the film to make a stir. Now, I was on a very lively show recently with a couple of leftists, and this is unusual because these days each side tends to talk more to its own side in a bubble, so to speak, and we say the left lives in a bubble. I don't think we live in quite the same bubble, and the reason is, of course, that we are exposed to what they say. We are exposed to CNN. We're exposed to the New York Times. Even if we don't subscribe, these mainstream cultural outlets, including, by the way, entertainment, music, Hollywood, they're out there. You can't really avoid them completely. And so we get what the other side is saying. They don't really get what we're saying. But interestingly, Piers Morgan, out of England, he has the show out of Great Britain, Piers Morgan Live. He had Clay Travis. Clay Travis is from Outkick. He does the show, which is Clay and Buck with Buck Sexton. He and I were on Piers Morgan for really the whole show with Cenk Uygur, who is the guy from Young Turks, a very over-the-top kind of guy. And then Claudia Conway. Now, Claudia Conway is the daughter of George Conway and Kellyanne Conway. This is one of those, you can call it odd couples. They're not the only odd couple. James Carville is married to Mary Madeline, and Carville's on the left and Madeline's on the right. And similarly here, George Conway is a never-Trumper, and Kellyanne is a pro-Trump advocate. And the daughter is, well, maybe a little confused, although she said on the show that she's voting for Kamala Harris. So she's clearly at least pushing to the left. And anyway, we had a pretty lively sparring session. And look, I mean, Clay Travis and me against those two, it's not really a fair fight. But what struck me was really something different, which is that this kind of back and forth, which was, by the way, very civil. At times, you know, our friend Cenk was got a little bit unhinged, particularly in his diatribes against Trump. But he was very civil to Clay and very civil to me. And overall, I said to myself, this kind of back and forth with people of rival and different points of view has actually become very rare in America today. It was quite common. And you'd find on Fox, but also on CNN, the show Crossfire was kind of almost a kind of a sample of this, a right and a left point of view engaging with each other. But that's what happened that's what happened on Piers Morgan. One of the points I made on that show, which I want to highlight here, is that one of the themes on the left, and they are so convinced that they're right about this, is that Trump is selfish. He just cares about himself. It's all about him. And that he would run over his supporters, he would run over his donors, he would run over the country if it was to his benefit. And I challenged that model or that claim with a single example that I think is sufficient even by itself to refute it. And that is the example of COVID. Now, you remember that before COVID, which is to say before March of 2020, Trump had a roaring economy. He was thriving. He was doing great. The economy was on full throttle. And it's hard to see Trump, even with election fraud, even with all the nonsense, even with all the propaganda, losing an election where people were doing just so well. And it wasn't just the economy. All the indices were positive. Foreign policy was going well. The crime was down. By and large, things were going great in the country. And then along comes COVID. Along come the people in the white coats. And you know, none of us at this point knew that the health institutions have become ideological. They've become ideologically corrupted and manipulated. Trump didn't know any of this. And so the guys in the white coats came to him and said, you need to at least temporarily shut down the economy. Now, this must have been, Trump must have known that if he did this, he was, you can almost say, killing his own golden goose. He was jeopardizing his own chance of re-election. He was shutting down his own successful economy. He must have known this, and in fact, he did know it. And yet, he did it. And how can we understand this except in one way, namely, that Trump was willing to risk his own re-election out of concern for the American people. He said, hey, if there's going to be a pandemic, hey, if there are large numbers of lives that are in peril, then I need to put the country first. And so America first for Trump does mean America first. And that means America ahead of the interests of Trump himself. With the massive tax hikes proposed by Harris, almost 40% top income tax rate, 7% increase to the corporate tax, a capital gains tax on unrealized gains, all these proposals taken together could add almost $2 trillion to a current $2 trillion deficit. Wow. You might be thinking it's time to make more of your savings tax sheltered and inflation sheltered. This is where the people at Birch Gold Group can help you. Birch Gold will assist you in converting an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. And the best news, you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Just text the word Dinesh to 989898. Get a free information kit on gold. No obligation, just information on fortifying your savings before the crazy really hits. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Thousands of happy customers like me and Debbie. You should contact Birch Gold too. Get started. Text Dinesh to the number 989898 for your free information kit today. FDNY firefighter Daniel Foley assisted in rescue and recovery efforts at Ground Zero. But Daniel couldn't have known then that his heroism would cost him his life more than 18 years later. His death, like so many others, resulted from 9/11-related illnesses caused by the toxic dust that formed when the Twin Towers collapsed. Victims and first responders are still suffering and dying from 9/11, and yet children in this nation are growing up unaware of America's darkest day. The Tunnel to Towers 9/11 Institute is helping educators teach children about 9/11. Tunnel to Towers 9/11 curriculum units have scripted lessons, background for teachers, activities for students. They're based on first-person accounts and designed to meet academic standards. The 9/11 Institute offers the Discovering Heroes book series. They offer a speakers bureau, a mobile exhibit with 9/11 artifacts and memorial scholarships for the children of the Foundation's program recipients. Help our nation keep its promise to never forget. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at T2T.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org. I want to talk in this segment about the issue of election fraud. And this is a theme that, on the face of it, may not seem to belong in the movie, and yet it does. It belongs in the movie. Why? Because the more that the movie makes the case for Trump, the more that the film shows that Trump has this larger-than-life dimension. He has great virtues that are more than enough to account for his very minor vices. His vices, by the way, that in some ways are themselves political virtues, at least in a certain context. Trump is up against these two dubious characters, this kind of duo, creepy duo of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And so the Democrats have good reason to worry because despite the media propaganda, despite all the smoke and mirrors, the American people can kind of pick out who's the real deal and who's not. And they can look at Trump's record against the Biden-Harris record. And so the desperation is beginning to show. And that is going to mean that the cheaters are going to be looking for ways to cheat. And so whenever I talk to people about the election and Trump versus Harris, right away, they go, well, what about the cheating, Dinesh? You of all people, you did 2,000 mules. You should know. Oh, is this something we have to worry about? Now, I've made the point that, yes, we do. The Democrats have been cheating, and they've got certain established ways of cheating that go back to the 19th century. But certainly under COVID, they were able to ramp it up or raise the ante. But I don't think that they can cheat in quite the same way that they did in 2020, in part because of 2,000 mules. If they send mules in the middle of the night with backpacks full of ballots, you're going to have Republicans, you're going to have patriots, you're going to have lawyers who are expecting this, who are looking for it, and it's going to be busted. So they're going to have to think of new ways to cheat. And what are those ways? Well, what we did in the film was we tried to put ourselves in the mind of the criminals and think of a new way to cheat. Think of a vulnerability, if you will, at Fort Knox. Think of a vulnerability in our election system. And the point of exposing the vulnerability, of course, is not to educate the cheaters. It's not to instruct them in how to cheat better, but rather the opposite. It is to expose it, because when you expose a scheme, it's kind of like saying, hey, listen, I found a door in the back of Fort Knox. It's open on Saturdays, and they're not locking it. And so the good thing is that when you do that, people are now going to be like, okay, well, now we know we're going to be looking at that door, and it's going to be very difficult for the criminals to pull off any kind of a heist. Here is Elon Musk, by the way, talking about illegals and saying that the Democratic scheme here is to, and he's right about this, it is to swell the ranks of the voter rolls with illegals. He goes on to point out that the voting margin in swing states has proven to be pretty close, but the Democrats are trying to, in a sense, get rid of swing states. In other words, swing them safely into the Democratic camp. He points out that they're fast-tracking these citizenship applications. They're flying asylum seekers into swing states as a surefire way to win future elections. And he goes on to point out that down the road, America could in fact become, well, I'll quote him, America then becomes a one-party state and democracy is over. The only, quote, elections will be Democratic Party primaries. And if all this seems a little bit fanciful, he then goes on, and this is how he closes out. He goes, this has already happened in California many years ago. Now, I agree with all of this, and yet this is not necessarily a cheating scheme for this election. What Elon Musk is describing is something that would happen over a period of years. Now, it's true that when Democrats hand out driver's licenses to illegals, they also hand them these voter registration forms, and there is a box there that you have to check to say I'm a U.S. citizen to be added to the voter rolls. But if you do check that box, you're kind of added to the rolls without any systematic verification. Is this person actually a U.S. citizen? The RNC, Lara Trump at the RNC, is onto this, and I'm going to have Lara Trump coming up in the next segment for an interview, and we're going to talk about Trump as a man, the private face of Trump. We're also going to talk about the issue of elections. But in the film, we have a section called the ballot makers. And I won't go into it in full detail, but I'll just touch upon it so you can sort of know what to expect, because this is not something that, quite honestly, either of us, including me, and after we did, Debbie and I and our little film gang did 2,000 Mules, we thought that we were reasonably well informed about election fraud. And yet we hired a couple of investigators to look at vulnerabilities in the election system. And they come to us and they say, we found a way in which you can make ballots. And I go, make a ballot, make a single ballot? They go, no, you can make an unlimited. You can make 5,000 ballots. You can make 10,000 ballots. You can make as many ballots as you want. And I mean, you make copies of a ballot, you make simulations of a ballot. And no, their point is you can make ballots that will work, ballots that will be counted in official tabulators. And this is so shocking and so outrageous that I said to these investigators, listen, you can't just come and tell people about this. You have to show it. you have to really prove it. And how do you prove it? You have to prove it by obtaining official ballot stock. In other words, states, when they have ballots to send you, they order these ballots from ballot printing companies, which make the stock. Well, amazingly, as it turns out, you can obtain that stock. You can buy this ballot paper, official ballot paper. And then if you think about it, the information on a ballot is easily available. Not only is it typically on the Secretary of State's website, I've looked at some of these websites. Now, some of them will say on the website, sample ballot. So you cannot just copy the ballot because, of course, there's sample written all over it. But let's say you request an absentee ballot from your state. They'll send you an absentee ballot, which is a real ballot. It doesn't say sample. And even more important, it doesn't have any watermark. It doesn't have any big set of identification numbers on it. None of that. It's just a ballot. And so you have the ballot stock, and now you have an actual absentee ballot. And if you head down to your local printer, I mean, pretty much any printer, go use their big machine, you can start reproducing actual ballots on actual ballot paper. And one of the most stunning demonstrations in the film is that up to this point, until the ballot is actually cast with let's say a name that you've plucked off the voter rolls and maybe a scrawled forged signature, it becomes illegal when you vote the vote. But it's not illegal to make the ballot. Amazingly, this process, you can go down the road without breaking the law. You only break the law when that ballot is in fact deposited into returned at the post office or dropped into a mail-in drop box when the vote is, quote, cast. Now, all of this is very startling, and it's startling to Trump. It's startling to Lara Trump. The good news is that they know about it now, and they know about the film. And as I mentioned, my purpose in exposing all this is to thwart potential ballot makers and potential fraudsters. So in 2000 Mules, we were looking in the rearview mirror. We were looking backward. This is how the fraud was done in the past, a year and a half prior in 2020. This time, we're looking ahead. We're looking not in the rearview mirror, but into the future and saying, this is how fraud could be done. This is a vulnerability in our system that we're drawing attention to so that the people who are in a position to do something about it, to block the fraud, to thwart it, will be on the case. If you're thinking about ordering from Balance of Nature, hold off for a moment because I got some information you need to hear. If you go to balanceofnature.com to buy their popular fruit and veggie supplements, it's fruit and veggies in a capsule, a discount offer will pop up. It may say 20% or 25% off your first order. Well, don't click that. Why? Because if you use my promo code, you'll get 35% off your first order plus free shipping. The special code is just the word America. Use the code and save big. Here's another bonus. Balance of Nature has a risk-free money-back guarantee, so go ahead and find out for yourself what I already know. There's no other product out there like Balance of Nature when it comes to fruit and veggie supplements. Whether you order online or call them direct, you got to use promo code America to get the special offer. 35% off and free shipping. Here's the number to call, 800-246-8751. Again, it's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code America, you get 35% off and free shipping. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Introducing Share Right. It's healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. And forget about paying excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. So think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With Share Right, your healthcare is their top priority. Empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh to learn more. See how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. That's shareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way. Guys, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast somebody who needs no introduction. This is Lara Trump, the daughter-in-law, of course, of President Donald Trump, but also the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. You can follow her on X at Lara Lee, Lea Trump, or the website, of course, just of the GOP. It's GOP.com. Lara, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. I've actually come on your show a few times, and now I have you on mine. I want to talk about the issue of election integrity in a little bit, but I thought I would start because, you know, with Trump, it seems to me that you have a private Trump and a public Trump. And that's not always true of people. I remember with Reagan, for example, the private Reagan was exactly the same as the public Reagan. So Reagan would cock his head in the same way. Quite frankly, he'd tell you the same story he told at the debate. And so you don't see a private Reagan that was different from the public Reagan. It's the same guy. With Trump, on the other hand, I think that there is a private dimension to Trump that some of us have seen from a distance up close, but you are around it on a regular basis. If you were to describe your father-in-law to people who have only seen him in the rallies, have only seen him on the public stage, what are some things that you would say about Donald Trump?
Oh, wow. Well, I do wish, Dinesh, that more people got to see him behind the scenes because, you know, you say that he's a different to an extent, and that's true, but he is so much of the same person that he puts out there. I mean, look, Donald Trump is as transparent as they come. You never have to wonder what he's thinking because he'll tell you. But I think for me, look, as the mother of his grandchildren, I love seeing him interact with my kids because it really shows you this man has a heart of gold. There's no two ways about it. And I love watching him interact with my kids because it really doesn't matter whatever else is going on in the world. I mean, I can think of so many instances where he had major situations to handle. And yet my kids come into the room and he lights up and he's 100% focused on them. And, you know, it's at the end of the day, Donald Trump is a grandfather. He's a father. He's a human being. And I think oftentimes people forget that. It's very easy to attack him. It's very easy for the mainstream media to demonize this man. But he really does everything that he continues to do to fight for this country, I believe, for his grandkids and for the children and grandchildren of every American, because he really believes that he can do the job that is necessary to save this country, to give it back to we the people. And I wish people saw that softer side of him sometimes. Now, I know why he doesn't put it out there out front. Look, when you go back into the Oval Office, you are going to have a lot to deal with. And you want to make sure that our adversaries and our allies alike respect you and you know that you are a tough leader. And I don't think there's any doubt about that when it comes to Donald Trump. But he is this incredible grandfather, at least to my kids. Whenever I see him with them, it warms my heart. He's also, Dinesh, one of the funniest people I have ever met. And no one tells a joke like Donald Trump or a story like he does. And he's just an all-around great time. So I feel very lucky to have him as my father-in-law in so many different ways.
I mean, I find it just really strange how people will take comedic routines that your father-in-law is quite obviously doing, and he does it in a way he kind of knows how to get the people who are trying to get him, right? So
he does.
If you ask him, like, are you going to be a dictator? He goes, no, I'm not going to be a dictator. Well, maybe for one day.
Only day
right?
one.
Right.
Yeah, now that's the line they run with.
Right.
Yeah.
They go, see, we told you. He even admits it. I mean, there's a certain preposterousness to all this. The thing I think that's very striking about Trump, and it's part of what warms people to him, because this part of him does come through, he's a very unique person. I mean, it's quite obvious. I mean, just look at the 2 assassination attempts, right? I mean, I don't know a person in the world who, after the second assassination attempt, would express annoyance that he's being interrupted in a golf game. He's like, I'm about to make this amazing shot. You know, you pull me off the course. You know, I don't know if I'd be in that form again. You know, that is a case where you could almost say God, when he made Donald Trump, he chucked away the mold, right?
Oh, there will never be another like him. And I think that is very obvious, but you're right. I do think that it's his unique nature and the way that he views the world and in a lot of respects himself that makes him the perfect fit for what we need in this country right now. Because to your point, Dinesh, who else? First of all, take one of the things that has been thrown his way, one indictment, one impeachment, a mugshot, one assassination attempt. Any one of those things on their own would have been enough for any other person to say, you know what? I think I'm done with politics. I think I've had about enough right now. I'm not in for this. They're going to continue to attack me, and I don't want to see what lies on the other side of that, except for Donald Trump. And he really is so unique in that way. And yes, I do think that it's just the way he's made and the way he functions. And it's to our great benefit as a country. And so I hope people appreciate that as much as you're saying, because I do think that any other person would not be standing and facing everything that he continues to face and fighting and saying, the joking about a second assassination attempt. He really is remarkable. And again, I think it's something that whenever people reflect back on Donald Trump, maybe 200 years from now, they're going to say, wow, what a guy and what a great asset he was to the United States of America.
In our conversation for the film, I asked you a question and you had a very interesting answer that I wonder if you would recapitulate here. I made the point that a lot of times you see with people who, as they become very successful, as they become affluent, as they become billionaires, they sort of depart from the general population because they become accustomed to flying on a private jet. They become accustomed to eating catered meals, and they develop a taste for fancy French food. The interesting thing about Trump is he's retained a relatability, even not just even to the upper middle class, but to the lower middle class guy, the working class guy, and not just the working class white guy, because working class black guys and working class Hispanic guys are also like, yeah, this is my guy, So the question I'd posed to you, and I'd like to ask you again, is what is it about Trump that gave him the ability to relate at that very basic working class, blue collar level to people?
That is an amazing part of him. And they call him the blue collar billionaire for a reason. I think it started the day he came down the escalator in Trump Tower and announced he was running for president. And really, Dinesh just started saying a lot of the things that had been on the minds of the American people for so long, but no one had the guts to speak up about them and really say them and deliver the message in the way that Donald Trump did. He's not a polished politician, and that's what people love about him. But I'll go back even further. I'll go back to whenever he first started in business in New York City. And I will tell you time after time, I continue to hear stories about how when Donald Trump would go to a construction site, he wouldn't seek out the manager there on site to say like, oh, how's everything going here? He would go to the guy who was in the corner just hammering nails in. He goes into his buildings and he wants to talk to the custodial staff or the housekeeping staff and ask those people how things are going, because he knows he's going to get a real answer from those people. Look, the ones at the top are always going to say, oh, everything's sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows here. Nothing to worry about. But he's always sought out the opinion and the thoughts of everyone from the top all the way down in all of his businesses and all of his, building projects that he's had across the world at this point. And I do think it has given him a relatability to people. I'll also couple that with saying that Donald Trump any day of the week is going to choose McDonald's over a fancy French meal. And I can tell you, when you're traveling with him, you're like, oh, guess we're going to have McDonald's tonight. He continues to be a relatable person despite his name, despite his fame, and despite, all that he's lived through in his life. There are so many people who see themselves reflected in Donald Trump. And I think it's an amazing thing. And it's a beautiful thing to see, actually.
We was chatting with General Flynn, and General Michael Flynn made the point. He said that when he was first called by Trump to come on the campaign, he told his wife, he goes, basically, this is going to be like Luxury City, USA. He goes, we're going to be staying in the Ritz-Carlton. We're going to be eating at fancy restaurants, on the campaign trail. He goes, oh, wait, they pull over at the Hilton Garden Inn, and then they go eat at McDonald's. And Michael Flynn is like, what kind of billionaire operation is this? But of course, it really shows that going along with Trump's style is a certain frugality. I mean, this is not a guy who's lost sense of the value of a dollar, and he runs even the campaign that way.
Absolutely. I mean, this has always been about the American people. And I think that whenever people are giving you their hard-earned money, and I'll say, Dinesh, especially right now in this really abysmal economy, we take that very seriously. And Donald Trump at the top of the campaign, of course, takes that incredibly seriously. We want everything to go as far as possible. And we never want to take anything for granted because we know how hard it is for people to make that money. And I think it's the reason that Donald Trump wants to work so hard to make life so much better for people. You know, he often gets, there's this idea out there, if you turn on the wrong channel in the mainstream media, that Donald Trump is running right now to, you know, for his ego, that he has to go and run for his ego. It has nothing to do with America. It's actually, his ego will be fulfilled whenever America succeeds. And we are so lucky that we have a guy who is going to work around the clock to make sure that this country is back on the right track. But it's amazing because the things that they always throw his way are the total opposite with Donald Trump. And oftentimes the things that the Democrats and the liberals themselves, Dinesh, are actually doing.
Lara, let's close out by me asking you a question that I'm sure you get peppered with everywhere you go. And quite frankly, it's the question I probably hear as much wherever I go. And that's this: can we be confident that we will have a free and fair election this time around? Between all the information that's come out from before, between the resources being devoted by the Trump campaign and the RNC, how are you feeling about election integrity in this last lap of the 2024 election?
I'm feeling great about it. Look, I think that there were so many lessons that we learned as a country after 2020, and we can never see another election like that happen again. Look, it's foundational to who we are as a country to have faith in our electoral process. And so it has been the number one focus of the RNC since I got in there alongside our chairman, Michael Whatley. We said we are going to focus 100% of our efforts on getting out the vote and protecting the ballot. And Donald Trump said, I'll get out the vote, make sure you protect the ballot. And so we pledged to have somewhere around 100,000 volunteers. These are people to work in the polling locations, to be poll watchers, to work in the tabulation centers, to be legal experts on the ground. 100,000 is what we said that we would make our goal. Right now, Dinesh, we've already crossed 200,000 people across the country who we have trained in all of these locations. We have also put forward 107 lawsuits. These are things like, for example, the state of Michigan had 92,000 inactive voters on their voter rolls. They did not want to clean those voter rolls, so we had to sue them to do that, making sure there's a parity, an equal amount of Republican versus Democrat poll workers in locations around the country. These are important things to establish that we do indeed have a free, fair, and transparent election. And I'll just go ahead and say on top of that, we want to make sure that we send a loud and clear message out there to anyone who is considering cheating in our elections. If that is something you do, we will find you, we'll track you down, and we will prosecute you to the full extent of the law. So we want to be a deterrent for people, anyone who wants to do anything nefarious in our elections. At the same time, we want to make sure that voters across the country, and I'll say no matter if you're voting Republican, Democrat, or third-party candidate, when you vote in this country, you should feel like your vote matters and your vote counts. And we hope at the RNC, we have been able to do that successfully this election cycle. Now, Dinesh, we asked our friends across the aisle at the DNC to come join us in this pursuit. Not surprisingly, we have not yet heard back from them. So we're taking it upon ourselves to make sure that that happens. But we've done so much work, and we're really proud of the work we've done. And we really want people this election to go out and make sure that they know whether you're voting early, mail-in ballot, or on election day, your vote counts in the United States of America.
So what you're saying, if I can put it a slightly different way, is that there's no reason for Trump supporters, for Republicans to feel discouraged, like, hey, listen, this is already, the fix is in, because there was a little bit of PTSD, I think, after the 2020 election. People did feel, I think, discouraged, and maybe even rightly so. But I think what you're saying is no, be motivated, be fired up, round up the family, round up your friends, get out to vote one way or the other, cast a legal ballot. And I think you even said in the movie that if we do our part, then it might even be an early night on election day.
Absolutely. Look, this is a turnout election. And if you go back to 2020 and really look at the numbers came down to tens of thousands of votes in a couple of key states across the country. And so what we want people to do is go vote early, get your vote banked. Don't wait until election day. Get your vote banked, and then make it your mission to get your friends out, your family out, people at church, somebody that you know from your kid's school. Get every person you know to go out and vote. And yeah, I can't do another 3 a.m. night, Dinesh. Man, we've had 2 elections that have gone very late. I'm already exhausted, and we still have over 30 days until this thing is wrapped up. I want to go to bed early on November 5th. And if everybody gets out and we swamp the vote, we really will make it too big to rig. And that's how we're going to be successful on election night, November 5th.
Awesome stuff, guys. I've been talking to Lara Trump, co-chair of the Republican National Committee. Follow her on X at Lara Lee L-E-A Trump. Lara, thank you very much for joining me.
You got it. Thank you, Dinesh.
Once again, MyPillow has been canceled by another box store, and so Mike Lindell is fighting back. He's passing an incredible offer exclusively for my viewers and listeners. The standard MyPillow retails for $49.98, but for a limited time, you can have one for only $14.98. Don't miss out on this amazing deal while supplies last. Order now using promo code Dinesh, or you can call 800-876-0227. That's the number to call. That's not all. MyPillow has deals all around. Get a 4-piece towel set for just $25, a brand new mattress topper as low as $69.98, the famous MyPillow bed sheets as low as $25, and there's a whole lot more. To get the discounts on all the MyPillow products, including the standard size MyPillow, just $14.98, limited to 10 per order. Go to mypillow.com, but don't forget to use the promo code. It's DINESH, Dinesh. Today is the day of the vice presidential debate. And I was asked on one of these talk shows, is this a debate that is important? Is it significant? Does anybody care? In fact, I think it was Piers Morgan who brought that up in on my appearance on that show. And I made the point that I think it is important. Vice presidential debates normally are not crucial. People are weighing the guy at the top of the ticket. But the reason I think this is important is, first of all, because Trump is in age, getting up there. He'll be closing in on 80. And so it's his choice of a vice presidential candidate, J.D. Vance, is made in the recognition that somebody is going to have to carry at some point the Trump baton going forward. That's one reason why this debate is important. Here's another. Both J.D. Vance and Tim Walz are vying for the white working class vote. The white working class looks to be the decisive factor in the 2024 election. And you have two rival types of populism that are in play here. So Tim Walz's populism is the populism of championing, at least in theory, union rights, championing government benefits for ordinary people, and also championing a kind of, at least what Tim Walz seems to believe is a kind of, aw shucks, ordinary guy, the guy who fixes his own car, working class style. Now, with Tim Walz, when you saw him fixing his car, it was a little bit bogus. He took out a filter, he looked at it, he put the filter right back. So he really wasn't fixing his car, but he was pretending to fix his car. With the Democrats, a lot of this is pretense. You've probably seen this recent photo of Kamala Harris. She appears to be with a briefing. She's got earbuds in her ear and her phone on her desk, and she's supposedly taking notes. And then if you look a little more closely, you notice that she's not taking notes. Her paper is completely blank. And moreover, her earbuds are not plugged into the iPhone. So she's not getting a briefing. She's pretending to get a briefing. This is a staged staged photo. So the point I want to make is what you're getting with Walz and also with Harris is not only faux populism, faux here meaning bogus, meaning pretend, but you're getting a kind of a deep vein of insincerity. The insincerity is part of a media repackaging of these two dubious characters. Now, when you see them act on their own, you see them unfiltered by the media, they're both complete fakes. Kamala Harris is a fake in a manner that we don't need to go into right now, but look at Tim Walz. If you see him on the football field, he's a 60-year-old guy, but if he sees a mascot on the field, he will jump up and down. He will make victory signs. He will do somersaults if he has to. He will embrace the mascot. He acts like a 7-year-old. And so either you have a guy who has the emotional intelligence of a 7-year-old, or you have a guy who's putting it on. I suspect more the latter. This guy is essentially an over-the-top actor. He's playing populist. But it's very transparent because anyone watching it immediately can see that what's in front of you is inauthentic. Now, Trump, by contrast, is the exact opposite. Trump is, if nothing else, an authentic guy. Trump acts in a way that only Trump would act. Trump says things in a way that only Trump would say. By the way, if Trump handed off, let's say, his social media to a social media team, it would be immediately obvious because suddenly you would have tweets that and posts that don't sound like Trump, and the Trumpsters, for one, would immediately recognize that this is not Trump. This is somebody else that is posting in Trump's name. And so the vice presidential debate here is a match of, I think, an authentic J.D. Vance, a guy who was, read his book, Hillbilly Elegy. This is a guy who was raised in desperately poor circumstances. His roots are in hillbilly country. They're in Appalachia. His family has got to be sort of seen to be believed, and some of the anecdotes in that book, I mean, they're laugh out loud funny, but they're deeply sad at the same time. There's a tragicomic aspect to all this. And of course, the story is sustained by the fact that J.D. Vance is able to overcome these obstacles, go on to get an Ivy League education, get a really good job, be successful in business, then run successfully for the Senate. So J.D. Vance is the real deal. Tim Walz is actually not. And J.D. Vance is also an extremely smart guy. I had him on the podcast, and very interestingly, when Debbie first heard J.D. Vance one-on-one, she messaged him right after and said, hey, you should think about one day running for president. Unbelievable. J.D. Vance at that point, honey, I don't even think he was a senator at that point. He wasn't even a U.S. senator. And so, this was very far-seeing, I must say, on Debbie's part to correctly intuit. Now, admittedly, in these situations, it's not a matter of you tell a guy, hey, you need to run for president, and suddenly he's, running in line to be president. A lot of factors need to play into that. And of course, J.D. Vance had a very close Senate race in Ohio that he was able to win. And then Trump, of course, picked him, I think rightly, because this guy represents, he doesn't just articulate the MAGA philosophy. And by the way, he's a convert to it. He started out skeptical of Trump. He wasn't sure, and probably because he was picking up a lot of the vibe around him. Frankly, when Trump first came on the scene, so did I. The general mood in the conservative intelligentsia was, who is this guy? What are his credentials? What's his background? What are his bona fides? What has he actually done for the Republican Party? What indication that we have that he has the same values that we do? So all of this was understandable going back to 2015. But when J.D. Vance saw Trump closer and saw what Trump not only said, but what he did, he completely came around. So I don't think that this is a case where J.D. Vance's credentials are suspect anymore, but more importantly, he has sort of lived out the MAGA philosophy. Now, with regard to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, it's important to realize that we're dealing not even so much with individuals, but with a regime that directs them as to what to do. It was the regime that chose Joe Biden. There wasn't even really a primary in 2020. The regime moved Biden to the front, and apparently under the understood condition that he would do what he was told, which he did, and he also would be willing in an extreme case, which he was, to exit the race, to get out, not to run for re-election if the regime came to him at a fateful moment and told him, you're out of here. And you're fired, to use Trump's own term from The Apprentice. And apparently Kamala Harris and probably Tim Walz are operating under the same rules. Hey guys, listen, we picked you. You are our pawns. You will do what we say. And if at some point we find it important or convenient to move you out, then you too are out of there. So it's Trump and Vance not really running against Harris and Walz. It's Trump and Vance running against a left-wing Democratic regime in which both Harris and Walz are pawns.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.